All right, y'all. We back. Bottom Up Podcast. Listen, this is a special edition, and we're going to keep it going after this. But today, we got a special guest here, Miss Suzette Silva, the Assistant City Manager of the City of Pompano Beach. And it's about time we start having some real conversations again. That's all we do over here at the Bottom Up Podcast. We are talking all things Black culture, Black excellence, Black economics, like just all things culture. Now we're talking about the Black community that is the heart of the downtown project here in Pompano Beach. So it's very important y'all tune in today. We got a lot to talk about. I'm pretty sure y'all been talking already, so let's get into it. But before we do that, we always got to start you off with something to make you think. So, Steph's. Hey, you, running for your life. Stand still and know that I am God, like my mother and my father. I am you. Hey, you. Hear me above the noise. Deeper than the wounds of trauma, hear me, you are healed and healing on your knees. Assume no position higher than knees bent in servitude. You have a higher calling. Good mornings I lived on after dying a million times and still rising. Maya Angelou. Poetic Justice. In the slums of Pompano, exit 36 between Atlantic and Martin, having a dream, death walking the streets I live on. I live on. I dream on. The boulevard of no return, watch the Lazarus effect. You possess the ability to speak things into existence. Poet, heavy, double scoops. Right into it, but before we do that, I brought a very special person to join this conversation, but you all probably have already been seeing her around. So when I try to introduce people, I do a horrible job at that, so I'm just gonna pass it on to her and let her big herself up about who she is. But she's my good sis, Aisha.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I'm glad to be here. My name is Aisha Alayande. I am part of Lotus Mindset. I'm a strategist, a connector, I'm a mother, most importantly, because everything comes from the womb to the world. Mm-hmm. So I'm here to talk, listen, learn, and make things better.
Now, I'm gonna just throw this out there right quick, because you know how I am.
Yes.
You are such a mother. How many children do you have?
I have 7.
See, this is where we start, right? You, like my patience. I'm 3, and and you have 7, and I've seen you around your children,
Yeah.
and just how you're around people. Period. You're always in a motherly mode. So, I'm pretty sure all mothers understand what I'm saying when it's like mother mode, and you do it with such grace and poise. Like 7. Yeah. And I got a 4-year-old now. You already know how he have me on my P's and Q's, right? So I just want to say that, like, when you say the most important thing is about what you do as being a mother, like you exude that in everything that you do. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
I appreciate it, because that's the best title I have.
Yeah, it's the most important.
It is.
Yeah, especially for us Black women, we gotta mother
more
than
the
we would
mothers
like.
of the world.
See, there you go.
So.
There you go. You take us there every time. Okay. And our other guest we have here today is Miss Suzette Silva.
Hi, Serica. How are you doing?
I'm good. We've been meaning to do this, but now has been like probably the best time for us to do it, right?
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Suzette, you're a mother, right?
I am a mother.
How many kids?
Not 7.
So I know, right? 7. She pulled
Bless
that
your
off.
heart.
Yes.
7. Whoa. I am a mother. I have 3 boys.
Okay.
So I'm raising Black men.
Yes.
I have 18-year-old. I was just telling Aisha right before we went live that my 18-year-old went off to college last fall, which was hard. He's up in Atlanta. He's an artist. He's at SCAD. And then I also have a 16-year-old. He was in high school. He's a sophomore. And then my husband and I started over to go for the girl, and we got a 3rd boy. But I love him to death. Magnus, he, has me wrapped around my little finger. It's just wrapped, right?
Yeah.
So he's 11. fifth grade, so about to move up into sixth grade. So
Okay.
he's a handful. My little, outgoing soul loves soccer. So love being a mom.
Yeah.
It's not easy being a working mom, especially
Right,
when you're in a job
right.
that I have with all the responsibility
Yeah.
and being really busy. So, but I do take motherhood very seriously. It's one
Yeah.
of the most important jobs I
What-
have. And,
But Suzette, who are you?
who am I?
Yes, the big granddam sugar. Right? Like, who are you? Because, right, yes, you're a mom, which is the most important title, but like you come with a lot of stuff, like good stuff. You are a smart woman.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. So, like, share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, my journey, let's see.
Yes.
So I'm from Jamaica originally.
Okay.
I moved here when I was 14. I grew up in Lauderhill.
Okay.
So, and my mom still lives in Lauderhill, and my in-laws live in Lauderhill. So that's one of the reasons I don't live in Pompano, because that's one of the things I've been hearing lately. You don't live in Pompano, you don't care. So we can talk a little bit more about that later, because that's absolutely not true. But, I'm close to my family. My mom's elderly, she has some health issues. So, but, I grew up in Lauderhill. I actually went to Boyd Anderson High School. Wasn't into the football so more, so I won't go there. Right. And then, worked hard, was always good in school. Grew up with a single mom, so always knew I had to push through. Ended up getting a scholarship to FIU, Florida International University, and I used to drive down to Tamiami Trail, back and forth. Always had like 2 jobs because I had to hustle, even though I had a scholarship, to kind of pay my way to not burden my mom, because I knew she had 3 kids to raise and support. And then, from there at FIU, I worked at Broward County for a couple of years. I worked there actually my full 4 years at FIU, interning, and in the accounting department. So I always knew I wanted to do accounting. Both of my oldest kids are artistic. I don't have that side of my brain.
You're not the creative.
It is not.
Left brain.
I love numbers. I love
right?
when things balance, checks and balances in the box. That's just me. With my kids, I'm trying to step out of that with the creative side, and it's exciting to see them grow in that respect. But from Broward County, I worked for KPMG, Pete Marwick. It's a large auditing firm. And besides the county, my introduction to government and public service came through auditing a lot of government. So I ended up auditing a lot of cities in the Broward and Dade County. And I used to audit Pompano Beach, actually, in the early 2000s. And I became an audit manager at KPMG, and I was ready to move on. The audit world, it's hard. It's long hours, 70-hour weeks, and I had a family that I wanted to start, and I hadn't started it yet, so I knew I had to kind of make a lifestyle change. So anyway, from there, KPMG 5 years, I knew Pompano had an opening. I was interested. I made that known, and I stepped into the role of controller, which is just a fancy way of keeping the books for Pompano.
So would you say you were wanted because of the work that you did? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, because they approached me, the director at the time, the finance director, to ask if I was interested. It was the perfect timing. It was funny, it was between a job at City of Pompano and Broward County in their internal audit department. So I had 2 offers on the table, and Pompano was actually less money. But I just felt drawn to the culture of the employees there, and I have to say, in my 21 years with the city, that culture has always just been so supportive, team-oriented, the tone from the top, just, very supportive of each other, all of the directors at the city. And that hasn't changed, because I audited a lot of cities and got to learn the culture of everyone. So started as controller. I got promoted to finance director in 2007. And, in that role, I enjoyed it. I would say around year 7, I started to get the 7-year itch, like, I want to be challenged more. I wouldn't say that being finance director wasn't challenging, because I certainly took the time to establish a lot of policies at the city, to make us stronger financially as a city, checks and balances, process improvement. That was kind of my niche. I took a lot of policies, financial policies, to the commission because I knew that if the commission adopted those policies, it would make the city that much more competitive in terms of trying to get grants. If we were borrowing money, we wanted to get a good credit rating so that when we went to the markets, we got a good interest rate on borrowing money for the taxpayers to save them money. So I took a lot of time to kind of establish those framework of policies to kind of strengthen our financial position. And proud to say we're going 13 years strong with very clean audits, no audit findings. Same for the CRE, 15 years strong with no findings. And we have a great finance director now because I eventually graduated and went down the other side of the hall to the city manager's office as an assistant city manager. And in that role, I continued to oversee finance and budget, purchasing, IT, parking, just to name a few departments in that role, but continued to oversee finance and mentor our current finance director. She's Jamaican as well.
Okay.
So she started out as a controller, and prior to her, Andrew Jean Pierre was our finance director. He moved on. But really mentored her into the position, and she's doing a great job now. She's been in that role for a few years, so really excited to see her grow.
I want to go back because you talked about credit ratings and we talked about auditing and everything, and there's been a conversation about overspending that we heard at the meeting. So I want to just take a deep breath and get into that conversation, right? Because what you just shared with us is that you have this track record of auditing and being accountable, right? And finding these resources for your city. So let's kind of dial back and talk about that in regard to this project and the idea that there's been a lot of spending. What does that look like? And is this right? Okay, yeah.
Let's go. Let's dive into
I want to, because we're here. That's what we're here.
That's why we're here, right? The downtown.
But not just but I thought it would be great for us to personalize and get to know you, right? Because you're not just an assistant city manager. You're a human that happens to be a woman, a Black woman at that, who comes with just a history. And we needed to know that first. But what we're here for,
and
right.
what we're here for.
And
we're here for both
not
of
right,
it.
not but, right.
And we're here to know
Thank you.
your role in the community, because it has been highlighted here recently because of your leadership on a major project that is happening in the community, specifically the Northwest community, the Black community here in Pompano. And it is very important to have this conversation as Black women, as mothers, as citizens, as people, human beings. It's important that we have this conversation because there's a fear that is being stoked. And I want to make sure we're speaking to the fear, because I have fears too. I don't want anybody to think that I don't have fears, but I want to make sure that I'm facing those fears head on with the tools that I need to make things better, because fear is an illusion oftentimes. We're in fear of something we don't know. We don't know what a downtown is going to look like in Pompano because we don't have one. So that fear now, when it comes to, like Aisha say, the overspending and the debt and the budget and all of these numbers, that to some is too much and to others is not enough. So how do you balance that as being the purse holder in the city? You hold the purse. How do you balance that?
Well, I think it's no accident that I'm the team leader for the project. As I stated, I come from, I think, once an auditor, always an auditor. So I still call myself an auditor today. Just being in the role of responsibility for the finances of the city. And I've been doing it for 21 years. Just because I'm no longer finance director, I still oversee it. I still mentor those beneath me in those roles today. And checks and balances are my thing. Anyone will tell you, when I review agenda items, I have to sign off on anything with a fiscal impact statement. The finance director does it also, but because I oversee that function, I sign off as well.
Right.
So, I oversee the budget, making sure the budget is balanced, that it's compliant with rules and laws, etc. So it's in my veins to just be in the box, right? I'm a rule follower, but I can always, also step out of that and try to understand the issues. So, I've always been tasked with trying to figure out how to finance things, how to pay for things in the most cost-effective way for the residents. I oversee grants is another thing. And, that's something we want to do for the downtown. We do want to pursue grants. They're never guaranteed, right? They're very competitive. I think with the change in Washington lately, everyone's trying to figure out what the priorities are going to be to kind of pursue that avenue. But I say all that because, yes, there are big numbers, right? And I think when people hear that the city has a $500 million budget or it's a $2 billion downtown project, their eyes like bulge.
Yeah,
and
y'all
like,
got that much money?
That's what they
Yeah.
think, which the 2 billion number, it strokes a lot of confusion because it's
Right.
really the value of the project when it's completely built out.
Completely built out.
When you got the residential built out, the hotel, the restaurants, the office, that's really what it's going to be valued at on the books of the county, right? And that's what the taxes, we want to come off of those tax rolls to be able to utilize that to provide additional services for the residents. So, there's a lot of talk also about all the consultants and that we have on the project. And I just wanted to take a minute to talk about that because yes, we do have consultants on the project and they bring different expertise to the table. I don't know everything. I have a role and I have a purpose, right? We have to finance things. We have to have a funding plan for the project. But at the end of the day, there are people who bring different levels of expertise, whether it's redevelopment experience, real estate experience. We have a master developer at the table. They have a certain expertise, and that's why we have them here. So, we can talk a little bit about the debt if you like. There's been a lot of sentiment out there that we have too much debt as a city. I've been hearing that for years.
Let me ask you this question, and I want to make sure I'm touching things. Grants. So you oversee grants. Do you know up to today how since you've been in this role, how much grant money have you brought to the city?
So I can't tell you the last 21 years. We can look it up, but I know we looked at 10 years because we looked at that recently, and it's a team effort. So let's be straight with that because I'm not an island unto myself, but I oversee the process. So we have a grants coordinator, and my job and the department's jobs are to feed and say, these are the projects coming up. These are the things we have an interest in, whether we're going to go to try to, or lobbyists and try to get some appropriations or earmarks. But you have state grants and you have federal grants, and we've over the last 10 years about $70 million we brought into this city, and it's important, right? Because I get that the residents say that the taxes have gone up year after year, and that's really because the baseline never stays the same, right? We have cost of living increases, just like you as a homeowner and as a resident. Your costs are going up. The cost for the city goes up, whether it's to provide police services or to fund our our fire department with everything they need. We add new programs all the time, whether it's Parks and Rec programs or cultural programs, which I know.
Yeah,
You
I'm
like to
big on
see-
that.
you
Where
like
the
to
money
see.
at over there? Yeah.
But the grants are very important because we've been able to deliver a lot of programs and capital projects in the city, and that hasn't been on the backs of taxpayers, right? Because if we still needed to get those projects done, and we knew those programs were important to the community in terms of quality of life for the cultural and the economics of those types of arts and culture programs, but if were it not for those grants or millage rate, the tax rate in the city would have been that much higher, right? Because it closed that gap and it allowed us to do that. So, we're very proud of that. It's not always easy to communicate that to the residents and to get them to understand that because, you do get a tax bill and we're a certain percentage of the tax bill. We're not the full 100%.
Yeah, because there's other taxing authorities
You got
that's
the
on
school
top of
district,
you
you got
the
Broward
county.
County,
Yeah.
the hospital districts. So, there are all of these different tax districts that make up your tax bill. And we are absolutely one of the components.
Right.
But we're not the largest component on that bill. But, Yeah, I mean, grants are absolutely important, and we're always striving. We're not always successful. We were successful with the 70 million. There's
Right.
some we've applied for once, twice, we don't get it, but we're going to keep hustling and trying because we know that, you know, for every 3 or 4 times you don't get it, that 5th time is important
Okay.
to get it. So,
So when you say millage rate,
Mm-hmm.
like I know what it is, but how would you make that to me, somebody who lives here? I just bought a house.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit me? What would you break that down to?
sure. So let's say you own a house and it's valued. If you go on the property appraiser's website, Broward County, it's going to have an assessed value for your property. And it's right there, and it'll tell you like your assessed value is $200,000. Now you can apply for exemptions, homestead exemptions, and the typical one is $25,000, right? So if you're assessed at $200,000 and you qualify for that, when the city taxes you, they're only going to tax $175,000 of your property. So then the city establishes what we call a millage rate, and it's, you know, right now I think it's 6 point. Don't quote me on that, but our operating millage rate, you know, it's a little over 5%. And what you do is it's per 1,000 value of your property. So you're 175. You divide it 1,000. You divide it by 1,000. That leaves 175, and then you multiply it by that 5 point whatever millage rate it is, and that tells you how much you're going to pay in taxes annually to the city. I mean, I do want to encourage everyone to make sure that they have their homestead exemptions. I know Marty Kier.
Yeah, he goes
You
around
love
and
Marty.
tells people that.
He gets
yeah.
out there, but I still have a feeling that there are people residents in the city, particularly in the Northwest, who may not even know how to do it or go about doing it to get those exemptions, because it's not just the 25,000. Pompano we're one of the cities that provide for the additional $25,000 exemption too for if you live in the city for a certain period of time, you're a senior. There are exemptions for widows, so veterans. So there are different exemptions that you can get to reduce your tax burden ultimately
So-
as a resident.
When I'm hearing this, I'm hearing will of economic opportunity and just education. Because education gives people the information they need to thrive. Some people don't
power.
know, right?
Knowledge
Some
is
people
power.
don't know where to get the information from. Sometimes it could be because the information has been historically kept from them. So in this time, what I think is so groundbreaking for the city, from my perspective, is that there is an education campaign, right? And so when I hear you talking about, some people don't know about, the homestead, and people don't know about these different tax breaks. How could they find out about that besides listening to this podcast? How would you, Suzette, make sure that the residents, not just in the Northwest, but how would you make sure that your residents, your city is thriving? What does that look like?
So I know that Marty Kier has been out, but for the city of Pompano, when we've gone out before, and actually when I was doing the roundtables, I had some of those flyers. I don't know if everyone got to take one, but I brought the homestead exemption flyer too, because I know that that's something that people are always concerned about with their taxes going up. I mean, we do have Save Our Homes, meaning that your taxes can't go up more than 3% per year. So that's something that kind of helps to keep taxes lower for our residents, meaning that even if the valuation goes up 10%, your taxes are not going to go up 10%. It can only maximum go up 3%. So, I mean, I think it would be nice to go out to the community centers and try to educate people more relative to that. We did that when we went out for the general obligation bond issue back in 2017 and 2018 when we were going out and doing that campaign. We wanted people to understand that, yes, we were asking you to approve these projects, which meant we were going to put a special tax on your tax bills to be able to pay for the projects. And I know in the Northwest, that's like McNair Park, Mitchell Moore Park. We did improvements to Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard as well. Fire Station 61 on 3rd Avenue was another project in the Northwest. But there were 25 projects that were approved throughout the city. So I know that we went out at that time and educated people on the homestead exemption, and we can continue to do that. The information is always on the property appraiser's website. I believe it's also on the city's website, but anyone can reach out to anyone at the city if they have questions. Myself as well, the budget department, all of that information is on the city's website. But I am glad that you talked about communication and education, because I know there's a lot of sentiment in calling what we're doing with the downtown marketing. And, for us, it's education, it's communication. And we thought it was important. One of the things that we've heard for years with the Northwest is that the city needs to do a better job communicating to the Northwest, because they're not going to get on the website. Most people don't go on the website. Sorry, Sandra. But, they're not going to sign up for the newsletter, right? They're not going to see an ad in Sun Sentinel. So we did mailers.
Facebook.
Yeah,
It's
there are
interesting,
creative ways.
but even then, you have Instagram, Facebook, but there's still the old school in the mailbox. You get the flyer. And we felt strongly at one point that we had to reach a lot of residents with the one large mailer that we did for the downtown. So
I want to touch on a couple questions here from our audience.
Yeah.
Someone asked about Dennis Walker. Thank you for tuning in. How do you see grants moving forward? And a follow up to that, are the grants drying up? What's the plan to replace grants if they do dry up? So.
It's a tough one. There's still grants out there, and we have our lobbyists that we work with all the time, so they keep us in tune. So we just have to pivot. We have a lot of needs as a city, and maybe there isn't a grant out there for roadway improvements anymore. I'm just using that as an example, but there may be grants for workforce development, right? Which is something I'm passionate about relative to this downtown project, because I know that pipeline and job creation is something that the opportunities that we've been talking a lot about with our downtown projects. So grants will always be there. They're going to pivot every time the administration changes in Washington, D.C. or up in Tallahassee. Those leaders have different priorities.
Yeah.
So you have to pivot. You kind of have to be in the know. You have to know when those announcements come out, and you have to be strategic. You have to figure out what your application has to look like and what they're looking for. And even then, it's still competitive, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, when people hear grants, we know grants are your money you don't have to pay back, right? So
It's free money.
We
love free money.
Free money till you got to turn into an administrative assistant and track all of what you're doing. That's not the free. That's the part you got to work for. I do want to touch on these two questions by Rakeem. With all the new development, will the old residents be taxed out? As we know, that is one of the biggest fears of the community, and we are not running from these types of conversations. But gentrification is the word that comes up, and people hear it and they're afraid. That's the question to that. What do we say to that?
So, in terms of residents being taxed out, I talked about the 3% saver homes. So, even though the downtown is going to increase values around the downtown, even if you're not in there, there is a cap to how much it can go up. And the maximum is 3% per year. But again, I want to encourage everyone to really look into the homestead exemptions, because really the more of those that you're eligible for, you really need to take the effort to kind of sign up for them. And every year they'll send you something in the mail, just making sure your situation hasn't changed. But I have to believe that there's some in our community, and particularly the elderly, who would qualify for the 50,000 exemption, that they really need to make sure they're taking advantage of that. But again, there's that 3% cap relative to that. Gentrification, there's the literal description of it, but I know what the community means when they say that, because, obviously we're not taking anyone's property within the boundaries of the downtown, where we've acquired property, and it's been for willing sellers, people who want to sell to the city, or the CRA, I should say, and who are willing to sell. We've negotiated with them, and we've paid a fair price for their property. But certainly gentrification also means people feeling that the opportunities in the downtown won't be for them, right? Whether it's the jobs, they won't qualify for the jobs, they won't be able to live in the downtown. So I know those are all concerns that I've heard over the last couple of months, and that fear related to that. As we've been going around, we talked about the workforce housing, and that this developer has agreed. The code does require a minimum of 15% of the units built to be workforce housing, but you can buy out of that as a developer.
What's the price for the buyout?
I knew you were going to ask me that, Sarah.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
I want to know.
It's a couple of thousand, and it goes into a housing trust fund, and then the city can use that for infill housing and different housing projects that you see, like our housing department putting up in the Northwest. some of that funding goes to pay for that. But they don't want to buy out of it. They want to provide the units. The
So they're
workforce
not
housing.
buying out of it, even though they have the option
Right.
to it.
They've committed to not buying out of it.
They've committed to it, meaning they have to do it.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. They have to do it because they're saying they're committing to the city that they're not willing to buy out of it, even though they have the option per the code, the city code. They're not going to do that. So, but I focus. Housing is so expensive, and I think one of the things I'm passionate about are the jobs that the downtown's going to create. And it's different levels of jobs, but I'm focused on how we get the incomes up, for our residents. And I know that's something that's the Northwest community is sensitive to, is how, all of these jobs that are going to be created, how can we create that pipeline of opportunity? One, you'll have people who may already have experience in some of these jobs that are going to get created, whether it's in hospitality or retail. And then you have the construction jobs, and you have the office jobs that are going to come here. And you're going to have the mid-paying jobs and the high-level jobs. So whether it's our kids who are coming out of college and we want them to come back home to Pompano. I've heard that a lot, right? The kids who are eligible to go out of, state to college or otherwise, or even if they go college somewhere to FAU, they end up finding jobs outside of Pompano because the feeling is those types of mid to high paying jobs may not be here. So again, for these jobs that are going to be created in the downtown, how can we work with the community to make sure that they're aware when these jobs come to the surface, right? And if they don't have the skills for those jobs, how can we work together to get them upskilled, reskilled, get them some of the soft skills they need? Because, you can't take for granted interviewing skills too, right? That's important. It's your first impression when you get to go to get a job. And not everybody knows how to dress the part or to answer interview questions. So I don't want to look past those important attributes too. So I'm very passionate about the job pipeline for the downtown project, and also for the small business opportunities if we want to transition into that. And I know there are a lot of people in the community who either they're doing something now at their house, right? They aspire to do bricks and mortar, but they don't know how to get to that next level, that next step. And I think an incubator is a great idea. Some people don't like the term incubator. We can call it whatever we want to call it. Small business entrepreneurship incubator. That's how we've been phrasing it. Because how do you get to that next level? How do you get the support you need to get you to that next level? Because it's not easy to start a small business. I think it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody.
Trust me.
It is not for everybody.
It's not. Entrepreneur here.
Yes.
My name is Serica, and
You can attest, right?
We are in a group.
support group. Support.
I'm an entrepreneur.
No, I talked about that. Little brief moment here, right? I
Yes,
talked about
I have.
starting entrepreneur support group. Because I say this all the time, it requires a curious relationship with God, because I'm like, wait a minute now, something not adding up. My work don't look like my bank account. And I got to make some adjustments. And,
The math is
when
not
we're-
mathing.
when you're talking about the small businesses and the opportunities and all of that, and that is what, when, I speak to you or to anybody in the city, I'm speaking about the opportunity. But I do want to get to a question. I'll go back to that later. I don't want to, because we're going to be talking about that much more tonight. But there's a couple questions about what Lotus Mindset's role is in that project. What is the role of Lotus Mindset in the project?
So, you approached me and we sat together and we talked about outreach, right? And like I keep saying, there's always that criticism about we don't know how to reach the Northwest community. We may not understand the story of the Northwest community. So it was important for us to bring a team on that we could converse with. We could hear your perception. And I respect you so much because I know you're tough as nails and you're going to tell me, you and I have gone back and forth and stuff. And I know that when you feel strongly about something, I'm going to hear about it, right? And I'll have my perspective. And hopefully over the last couple of months, we've gotten to know each other personally. We've talked about our families. I know you lost your mom, so sorry about that. My mom had health issues, but on a professional level. And I really respect you ladies and all the work you've brought to the team over the last couple of months. I've seen it. I've seen the commitment, the dedication. So I really appreciate all you done to get the word out into the community, to share information about the project, and to continue to have those conversations, whether they're tough or not. And like I said, I respect that. I respect the tough conversation because I know there's sentiments in the community that we haven't done enough as a city over the years. Whether some of that is laid in truth or some is just perception, as long as the perception is out there, then we have work to do.
Yeah.
And we have to have
absolutely.
but we have to have conversation, right? Respectful conversation of each other, because if we don't start with that foundation of respect,
Right.
where we listen as much as we speak and we hear each other's perspective, then we're not going to get anywhere and we're not going to move forward.
I do want to read this definition because someone's mentioned it, and I want to put it on the record here that we touched on the literal definition of gentrification. It is the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by wealthier people moving in, improving housing and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. That is the literal definition of gentrification. So I'll tell you how Lotus Mindset came about. Lotus Mindset came about 3 years ago, actually, but it was even before that, seeds had been planted because I've been following this downtown project for over 10 years. I remember the first meeting I attended, it was when the Urban Land Institute came and they were doing a presentation, and Alonzo Mourning was there, and he was talking about the work he was doing in Miami, and I'm sitting in the room and I literally felt like I was in kindergarten and this was AP math. Like everybody was talking over my head. Like all I knew was Alonzo Mourning was in there. And when he started talking about the work he was doing in his community and what he was doing, I started to see it. But what brought me to the table to even go there was poetry, spoken word, art. Like why I don't see the things I like to see in the community. So I got very vocal about that and just started attending. Yeah, I got very vocal about it.
Did you hear her?
Yeah,
I remember.
and you know, there was always a sense that I wasn't being heard because I wasn't seeing the change. And when I started to see people like, I'll never forget when Sharon Stone Walker came aboard with the company at the time, CCC, and she came on board and she reached out to me. She got a job because I opened my big mouth. And they needed to hire somebody to speak directly to the community because I had a valid point. There was programming going on in the community for arts, and it wasn't culturally significant to the Northwest District. So bam, Sharon Stone Walker is hired. But Sharon Stone Walker came to myself and at the time Eccentric because she needed to know more about culture. And what I saw that as is, okay, Sarah, you may not be the one that go in, but you open the door for others to go in. So now we can start bringing each other up and into what is happening in the city. And so much about this project came from me just getting involved through the arts and seeing how the city works. And that's the will. That's the will of economic opportunity working. Whatever gets you to the table, start there because you're going to start looking at every other area. I learning about procurement and learning about finance and all of these components of what it takes to make a city a healthy city.
And all the red tape.
And all the red tape. Because I'm like Suzette. If you send me one more email, and it's like, and Suzette is very anal because if one number,
thanks for saying that.
One number or one Suzette, you know what I mean, Suzette. But no, Suzette gonna put, I need this comma, like I need this to say this. And I'm grateful for it because I'm learning from you.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm in a space to learn how to be more effective at what I'm doing in business, in my community, and in just my personal accountability. So that type of anal
You mean that in a nice way, right, Serica?
I appreciate it because I know, like, I'm not going to slide under
Yeah.
Suzette with something. Like, I have to give her what it is. And I have to, lean into this right here because it's so important for us to, here at Lotus Mindset, to make sure we're being transparent, and then we're also making sure we're holding people accountable, ourselves included. So we're going to get ready to queue up a video here, but while we're queuing up that video, I wanted to get back to that gentrification because there's been a lot of questions coming up about it affecting the low to moderate income housing levels. It's a lot. That's the big thing. So it's not like let's skip over. We're going to come back to it as many times as we want. But when I started Lotus Mindset with Mona Lisa Weber, it was to be the solution to gentrification for our community. So we started to be more introspective than looking what's happening outside. And we realized we were unhealthy because we didn't have grocery stores. Okay, we don't have grocery stores. Why don't we have grocery stores? So when I started following development and understand how development works, why don't we have grocery store? We got the corner store, don't get me wrong. Georgia Grocery is a staple in the community. We used to go get the best breakfast, but that was back when Grandma and them was in the kitchen cooking. Grandma and them ain't in the kitchen over there anymore, But we don't have a quality grocery store.
But what do you think the grocery stores look for to figure out?
So
Like
that's
the
what
ones,
it
the
is.
notable ones that, are of a certain size, what do you think they look for?
Household incomes. They're looking at how much money that area makes
Exactly.
in order for me to come over there. But
Exactly.
that's something I learned getting into so we don't have a grocery store because we not making enough money.
And the same for the banks.
Yeah.
Because I heard that at the commission meeting, the last few meetings, about the grocery store and the banks. And Roca had a grocery store in the conceptual plan, and I wanted to rewind a little bit about the housing situation because I've heard the affordable housing. What we've been talking about is workforce housing, but there's a lot of sentiment out there about a need for more affordable housing, and as a city we don't disagree with that, right? There's always a need for affordable housing, but I think the concentration of it.
Yes.
Is where
let's
it becomes
talk about
a problem.
It is a
right?
problem. And this is something I want to make sure I'm speaking to because I had to see the impact of affordable housing. Grew up Parkway East, G202 apartment. That was a one-way in, one-way out project. Like, trust me, and some people still there.
I remember Parkway East.
It's been torn down, and some people mentally are still in Parkway East. I'm saying that because what I've learned, affordable houses, Pompano have 15 affordable housing complexes in the city, the second most in the county. Okay, I think the county, the second most, yes, in the county, but I think Fort Lauderdale is number one. Biggest Fort Lauderdale is, then Pompano's number two. There's other cities in the county that have no affordable housing in their municipality, but Pompano have 15. Out of those 15, 9 of them are in District 4. So there is a concentration of affordable housing projects, which if we just break it down to what the city is, then District 4, rich in culture, rich in history, rich in people who have the creativity to build and create whatever it is we want. We are the projects of the city because we are the low income district. Now, in order for us to change that, we need to increase household incomes, but we can't just increase household incomes. We have to put more people in the city to bring up the average household income in that district in order for us to get just a grocery store. Just a grocery store.
Yes.
But
not only bring people in the city, how can we get the incomes up for the people who already live here in the Northwest?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? How do we do that?
And that's where you and I, we've been talking about that. Like, how do we do that? We need workshops to start yesterday. I've been following this project for 10 years. 10 years. And I've yet to see a plan other than the master plan. I've seen the master plan keep going, no matter what. Keep going. I've seen city managers change. I've seen the commission change. That master plan has kept going, and in studying it, it's been in process for 33 years. 33 years, and the master plans are 50-year increments. And developers aren't just thinking about building here, they're thinking 50 years ahead. And we have to think that way too. You know, so when I'm talking to you about things that we have to do or we need to do, there's some accountability the community has to take too, because I know that there are programs out there that the city has that can help benefit. The city needs to do a better job about communicating, and you guys are trying. You're
Doing.
trying and
They're
doing.
Yeah,
They are
they're
doing. Yeah, they are doing. And the community has to meet you all with the people to show up at these workshops, with the people to sign up for these opportunities, because we need to know what all do we have. We need to do an inventory. A community
Absolutely.
inventory of what do
Absolutely.
we have? How many plumbers do we have? How many
Thank you.
electricians
Thank
do we
you.
have?
Thank
How
you.
many of these
Because that's
things do we
something,
have?
you're hitting the nail on the head, because that's a lot that we heard, right? We have an interest in working, we have this, but we really don't know what that looks like. So one of the things we've been talking about when we do these roundtable meetings with the community is we need to gather that data.
Do you know how many have been
gather
done?
We've gotten a lot of forms. Physically, I don't have to count. Also online, because now
Right.
on the downtown Pompano Beach .org website, you can actually
Over
go
100?
online. Oh yeah,
So
you can
over
go
100
online and
forms.
fill out the forms digitally.
Okay.
So and we plan to do more outreach. I mean, we started that. You know, it's a 10 to 15-year project. So we like to say we need people to be patient, right? Because yeah, things are going to gradually start happening in the downtown, but we have time, because if there are people out there who have an interest in doing something but they're not qualified, we're going to work with them and try to bring partners to the table to figure out how can we get people right certified.
Right.
If you want to be a plumber, right, let's work on looking at additional grants and talking to our state representatives for appropriations
Working
and
with the
earmarks money,
schools.
working with the schools as well. You know, I'm a mom, so I'm very busy, but growing up, mentorship was always important to me. I haven't been able to do a lot of it. I know the city has programs where kids will come, and I've done that before, where kids will come and shadow you at the city, which is hard, because you know, when kids come, you have to pay attention and you have to show them what you're doing and take the time. And at my level, it gets really crazy sometimes, but it's something. I used to be a big sister when I was growing up, you know, in high school and stuff. So it's something I'm passionate about. I'd love to get more involved with it now that my kids are getting older. I don't know, this downtown project is a beast. Don't get me wrong. But you know, I see others in the Reverend Campbell in the community with his Adimu. I know he had the function on Friday night. I wasn't able to attend that, but I really admire him and what he's doing as a mother of boys and seeing how he's mentoring. And I know our master developer, Phil Mays, has actually gone there and met with the boys in his program and talked to them about his story and how he got where he is today. And there are a lot of, you know, people at the city who I think would love to come out and speak to in their position, because there are opportunities, there are jobs at the city too. And how can we get residents? I don't agree that all residents who work for the city should live in the city necessarily, because you know, there's a shortage out there and that limits us. But that, because when I get job applications, the first thing I look for is address Pompano Beach. Oh, this looks good. But then I go to the experience and sometimes it's just not there, and our hands are tied. But then maybe through this program too, it's not just about jobs in the downtown. How can we get people in our community the skills they need to get a job at Pompano Beach, right? Maybe there's a program we can develop through that. You know, with the schools, mentorship programs. I know one of the things that the architects for the downtown HOK talked about is that ACE program, right? Of contractors and architects and engineers, and starting that here in Pompano Beach at Blanche Ely High School. So it's a program that already exists. It's something that I pushed them to bring to the table as we were interviewing different architects for the work here. It's something I brought up, and I said I need a pipeline to the high schools, because a lot of kids don't even know what an architect does, right? And wouldn't it be great for you to come out and show and open a child's eyes to the world of architecture? I'll tell you, I tried to push my son in that direction. He wasn't having it, because when he told me he was majoring in art, I'm like, what about architecture? He's like, I want to be an illustrator. I was like, okay. But, you know, so programs like that, I think are important, because you know, you have the kids in school like I was. And even though my mom was a single mother, I was always just acclimated to school. You know, I was anal then too, getting the good grades. And I feel like those kids kind of find their way. They know how to find the scholarships. They go to the guidance counselor. But you have the kids who might have a C average or less. And how do we mentor them, right? To open their eyes and see that that opportunity is there for them as well.
It's important. It's so important to open the world up to our kids. Because
you talked about that too,
talked
how
about
you've
that.
traveled and seen things.
Listen, kids are only going to they're going to do one or two things. They're either going to imitate what they see or do the opposite. And oftentimes, if you don't see anything opposite, you don't know, unless you have a wild imagination. See, I had a vivid imagination. And then I also had people like Willie L. Lawson, who had the NAACP AXO competition that I won for a couple years. Poetry. We went to New Orleans one year and Baltimore one year. So I'm seeing something outside of Pompano. And then it's people like Hazel Armbristol and Mandy Struggles, who it took me to get to English 3 for her to see my talent, then recommend me to go to honors. And she had always told me, Sarah, you should have been taking, you know. And if we don't have the things in our community to help nurture our children in whatever paths they choose to go down, then we're doing a disservice to our community and our future. And that's why the Wheel of Economic Opportunity for us is so key with this project. And maybe we're not doing a good job at explaining how the Wheel of Economic Opportunity came from the community and how we get it working. So that's something we should definitely, so important, because when I see it, I see possibilities in every area. You know, I come through culture. That's what brought me to the table, culture. But I also see public realm. I have to see Gen Z and beyond because I have a 4-year-old. Technology, I have to see it because this is technology right here. And all of the interconnection of these spokes on this wheel is community. And it's not me knowing everything. Like I worry. I'm scared when people know everything, because how does your brain capture that? You know, it's quite dangerous if you ask me. But I'm looking at the fact that this wheel came from the community because of lack. It came because I identified what I was lacking as a child, what I wish I had when I did go off to Baltimore and win these competitions. But when I came back, I didn't have anything there to continue to nurture that. I want to get to something, Suzette, because this is very important that we touch on it, because it is out there in the community. And we're here to address things about the community, for the community. We're going to queue up a video here, and then we'll come back. But yeah, let's get into it. Play this video.
I'm talking about that same property where we're not included in the project, because everybody is standing around waiting to make money from this project. And then Miss Suzette stands over there, who looks like me, the 3rd highest paid person in this city, has never, ever, since she's been in that position, tried to help anyone of color in the city.
Commissioner.
I know that feels uncomfortable too, but it's the truth. It is.
Let's try and stay above that. Getting personal to staff.
No, I'm talking about that same property where we're not included in the project, because everybody is.
So, perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective, right? Because that is not the truth. It's nice to have a platform so you can say certain things, but that is her perspective. And I think it's very important for audience members to hear that, because when she was confronted with, hey, let's not make it personal, she again doubled down on it being the truth. But that is her perspective, because this may not have all the knowledge to make such a statement. So someone who does have that information would be you, right? So,
Yeah.
this is where we are.
This is where we are.
Because there are a lot of questions and things that were brought up, but let's speak to that. And before you answer that, it's also important to know, right? You are a city employee, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And your job description, your role, is it responsible for the city, or is it specific to the Northwest District?
It's the city.
Okay.
Right, it's the city.
Okay.
Generally, and all finances and how we pay for everything, how we balance our budget, and provide services to the residents in the most cost-effective way.
And when you make decisions in your role, does that encompass every resident in every district?
It does, absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's just important information,
Yeah, it is.
right? So
But I want to
but
perspective.
perspective.
Let's go to perspective
Right,
here.
Let's hear or respond to that statement.
You know, I would say this, right? Communication is important. And I've said this to you before. I think one of the things that maybe I don't do enough of, or the city, because you've said that before earlier, is communicating what we do for our residents. And that impacts the Northwest community as well. And, you know, I've been here 21 years, so, you know, there's a lot of things that I've done that's impacted the community directly or has impacted the Northwest community indirectly. Because like I say, when I have to get grant money to put in our general fund, it means now we don't have to raise taxes to deliver those services citywide. Because when we raise taxes or a millage rate, it affects every resident in the city. Differently, obviously, but it affects everyone. So, you know, if I had to highlight some of the things over the years that I would say have a direct impact on the Northwest community, one, the general obligation bonds. Back in 2018, that was an item the voters had to vote yes. We hadn't issued debt in many decades. We had a lot of aging parks, a lot of them in the Northwest, a lot of big parks like Mitchell Moore, McNair Park. And we had to go out there and ask the residents, because they have to vote on it. You know, when you do one of these bonds, and it was for 25 projects throughout all the districts in the city, and a number of those projects were in the Northwest. We were looking to do $175 million in projects.
So 175 million
Throughout the whole city.
Throughout the whole city. That's what the bond
That's what
covered.
the bond was.
Okay.
And 60 million of that was the Northwest. So there were projects in the Northwest, 60 million, that 175 million was in the Northwest.
So wait, okay, so 175 million dollars for the city for 25 projects throughout the city, 5 districts, okay? And of 175 million dollars, how much went to District 4?
District 4, I'm trying to think, because you have McNair, which is 15. Maybe, in fact, it's wrote a number out there, don't quote me on this, maybe like 30 something million.
Okay.
Because, you know, you have your Mitchell Moore, you have your Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard improvements. We did improvements from 6th Avenue all the way to I-95. We had Fire Station 61 off 3rd Avenue. That was also a project in the Northwest. So, I mean, I say all that because, you know, it was tough. We didn't have a lot of this. A lot of people in the Northwest did not support the general obligation bond issue because they didn't trust us to deliver the projects. And we can talk about that a little bit more in a minute, because I know the Senior Activities Center has come up over and over, and that was a project as well in the Northwest District. But just rewinding to the effort of trying, because you had to get voters throughout the whole city to vote for this, right? And you had to have enough projects in there where some things interest different people.
Right.
Because believe it or not, there are people out there who don't go to the parks.
And don't want
they
the
don't wanna
parks
go there,
improved.
right? There are
Don't want to
people-
spend money on it.
Yeah, there are people who don't have kids and don't think they should pay taxes to the school district, right? I heard all sorts of things when I was doing the Go Bond. But we had a team of us, and we would go to all of the civic associations in all the districts and HOA associations to try to reach the people to educate them on the Go Bond and why, trust us to put these additional taxes on your bill to deliver and build these projects and pay it back over 30 years. And it was 30 plus presentations that I went on. I was always opening up all the presentations. I'm not one, I don't complain, but yeah, it took time away from my family to go do that. And I had nothing to gain from it because, as people like to say, I don't live in Pompano, right? It's more work because once it gets approved, you're like, oh my gosh, it got approved. Now the real work begins to have to deliver all of these projects and get them done. So, but I say all that because there was a lot of effort that went into that initiative to deliver those projects. And a number of them were in the Northwest District. And, there's always a sentiment occasionally when something goes wrong with a project that the city did it on purpose because it's in the Northwest District. And that's not the case at all. I mean, I think, as a city, you're rolling out all these projects. You're doing it in 5 years. We rolled out 22 projects. That was a lot. And I would say the team did a great job doing it. But with 22 projects, you're going to have issues and things that you have to tweak. You're going to have people who were not part of the conversation when all this outreach was happening for the projects, but they come in at the end and they say, well, I wish you could have done this. Why didn't you do this? And that's all great and dandy. We can certainly react at that time and make those shifts and changes. But, I can tell you for sure that it wasn't a conscious decision to build a smaller senior center in the Northwest. I'm sure some decisions went into the Larkin Center being down the street, and then you're building a smaller center kind of down the street. But it wasn't a conscious decision to build a smaller center over here versus a different district. Like, no one in the city on the 4th floor, I can tell you, that thinks that way, right? And if there are issues with the project, like I said, whether with the AC system or otherwise, we have issues that happen at other projects too, right? We fix it, right? Someone may not get up at the commission meeting and say, oh, well, the it wasn't working over at this center. We just fix it because we hear about it and we respond and we fix the issue. So another thing that I was involved in is I've been at the city a long time. So there's been recessions during 2008. I won't go that far back. But, COVID, towards the end of 2019, COVID was coming around and, it was as a city, it was hard for all the cities. And Mr. Harrison, he was the president of we have a Broward County City Managers Association. He was the president of that during this time frame, and he tasked me to be on different subcommittees because this was uncharted territory, right? Whether it was for the school system or the cities, because
nobody knew how to do it. Yeah.
Restaurants were shut down.
Retail
was shut down. People were losing their jobs or their hours were getting cut back. They didn't have that disposable income to spend. So as a city, we lost a lot of revenues because of that. Because what people don't know is we get a big percentage of our revenues from property taxes, but we also get revenues from when you go buy something in the store and you see that sales tax, that 7% sales tax in your bill, the city gets a share of that. So we get a lot of our revenues for those types of areas. And during COVID, we had a hole in our budget. Because the revenues weren't coming in. And I remember at the time Broward County got money from the government. They called it the stimulus.
The federal government.
Yeah, the federal government. You heard the term the stimulus. So what they did though is they were giving the money to governments with a population of over 500,000. So none of the cities in Broward County met that criteria. So the county got the money, right?
The county got the money.
But the cities, we all got together and we said, you know what, we think we can get that money to our residents faster. So Mr. Harrison put me on a subcommittee with a few other cities, like 5 or 6 of us. And we were working with Broward County to try to figure out a plan to them to break off a percentage of what they got to each of the city. And we ended up getting $7.6 million in Pompano Beach. That was important because it allowed us to fund food giveaways. If you remember some of the food giveaway sites. It also allowed us to provide personnel at the testing centers and for people to go there and get tested for COVID and the vaccinations and so forth. But more importantly, also it covered a lot of the city's revenues that we had lost, and we didn't have to lay people off. And that's important because usually when things happen at a city and you're pressed with a recession, unfortunately, you're not laying off firefighters and police officers or even executive. You're starting at different lower levels in the organization, right?
Right.
So I know 30% of our employees are residents of Pompano, and a lot of our employees live in the Northwest.
Yeah.
So because of that, we were able to get millions of dollars where we didn't have to lay anybody off. And we
Right.
did the same thing. There was a second tranche of money that came called American Rescue Plan Act monies. And, in both cases, we had to bring the programs to the commission. We had to recommend how we're going to spend the money. But we did the same thing with that, too. We plugged our revenue loss, and we didn't have to lay anybody off. And I remember just working and overseeing and designing that program with staff and Mr. Harrison to figure out the best way to spend that money to make sure that we kept our residents and the city running with no interruption of services without having to lay anybody off. And another project that was on there was the Mitchell Moore Annex project, that tech center they're about to do the ribbon cutting on. I won't say it was my idea. Parks and Rec did a good job of coming up with the idea. I had to make sure that it was eligible, the federal rules governing spending that money, that stimulus money. But, I worked hard to get the department to the table with Tammy Good, our capital improvement manager, and I kept saying, you guys got to meet, you got to get this project moving, you got to get with the district commissioner and get her to look at the plans, go visit other gaming centers, because it has like a learning element and then it has like a gaming
element,
right?
Which is good. They're into
Yeah,
that.
and I know
Yeah.
the district commissioner was passionate about that project.
Yeah.
And like I said, the ribbon cutting is coming up, and I worked with IT because we put some money in there for computers and gaming computers. Trust me, I have kids, so
Yeah.
I know how important that's to the culture, the
Right.
gaming, and just keeping our kids busy and.
I know,
so
cousin
they're not
Ida
idle.
mine is a
So I say all that because I've been a part of. I don't brag about it. I don't come and say, look what Suzette did. Look at these programs because I don't do it alone. Obviously, right? It
Yeah.
takes a team, but certainly have been in charge of framing those programs and making sure they get executed correctly, that the money's spent right, so people don't come back and say, oh, you spent it wrong, you got to pay it back.
Right.
And we certainly don't want that to happen. So, I listen, I understand there's a lot of work to do in the Northwest. I understand that, the perception of the city over the years is we haven't done anything. And like I said, perception sometimes can become truth if you feel that that's your truth to have. But I do feel like there's some misinformation out there too. And, I'd love to continue the conversation.
Let's do it right.
No.
No,
we're
continuing the conversation
Yeah.
because people want to know, like, why are you all up in the CRA? But that was a question. You're so involved.
Right. And it really started from the financial aspects of the project. A funding plan had to be designed for the project.
Okay.
We talked about building a new city hall. And the most important thing for us in funding the infrastructure for the downtown, which is, there's a lot of confusion about what infrastructure means and that drainage waterway. I know there are people in the Northwest who don't support it. There's some that get it. Excuse me. So, I came to the table because my unique skill set of managing the money, of developing the finance plan, I've done it for 21 years for this city, right? I've overseen issuing debt for the city before, and their guardrails is a term you'll hear me use a lot because, when we issue debt as a city, we're looking for somebody to loan us the money, right? And you as an individual, you may have a credit score. You go buy a house, you have a credit score. The city has a credit rating. It's very similar. And when we go to issue debt, we have to go through that ratings process. And they look at our finances, they look at our financial statements, they look at our track record of audit findings, they look at, do we have policies to show that we're being responsible financially as a city? And we have a pretty high credit rating. It's like it's up there. It's like a AA rating. The highest is AAA. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons we don't have the AAA is because they do look at poverty levels in the city. They do look at income levels, which is why this downtown project is so important, to elevate those property values, to elevate the incomes in those areas of the city so that we can get our rating up. And the reason the rating is important is when we go to borrow money, we get a very good interest rate, right? So that we're paying less interest on that debt over time, which means more savings for our residents, basically. But that's really the platform for being the face of the project. Listen, city, CRA, you know, that's a boundary line. To me, we're one Pompano, we're one city. And, you know, whether if you remove the boundaries of the CRA and the 3,000 acres in the Northwest, the need is still there, right? The need to create opportunity is still there. It doesn't go away if you remove the boundaries of the CRA, right? We're still going to want to generate those revenues to continue to create those opportunities for the community.
Okay, so speaking of opportunities, I'm going to go back to a couple things some people brought up specifically. There was a couple questions around how many Black contractors will be a part of this downtown project. And the Northwest District is going to be very specific. And you know, in any conversation I've had with you, and I'm pretty sure anybody in the city can say, I always say the Black people in the Northwest District. Because we need to be seen and heard and spoken for. The district commissioner speaks for the community. She does. There are people also who are speaking directly to the city, and we want to make sure as a platform that we're being open to people coming and having conversations. So there was a question that came up, and the question says, how many local Black contractors will be hired to do work on the downtown project? That was a question. If we could.
So, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I can't define that right now. I mean, what I've talked about is the one thing about me, I'm going to tell you straight up. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to look you in the eye and say, yeah, we're going to hire 15 Black contractors, because for one, we talked about gathering data. I don't know who the Black contractors are. I really don't. Because I think one of the things we've struggled with over the years is getting people to even register with the city to be a vendor. And if you don't do that first, and the city's buying services, whether we're getting quotes or we're doing competitively bidding out the jobs, or even if you're a sub, if you don't take that first step, there's no way for us to reach you when those opportunities. One is you being in the mix to be considered, right? And two, are we doing effective outreach to make sure you know when those opportunities arise that they're available? Because like I keep saying, we do advertise in Sun Sentinel, you know, like the rest of the cities in the county, but how many people? No offense, Sun Sentinel.
But that's what
Lotus
real.
Mindset is here for.
Right. So that as well, but continuing to have the outreach. I know our purchasing department is about to do an outreach event. This one's going to be at the Cultural Center, but trying to get businesses, especially small businesses, to sign up, right? But
So
I think
what
the
date
first
is
step,
that before you said, what date is that?
I think it's the 27th.
We're going to get that date. So we need to make sure we get that date because we need to get that
I will
out
get
to
you
the
exact,
community.
I'll get the exact date to you. And they're linking it to the downtown, but as well, because there's always the opportunity to continue to have that outreach. But you know, data is important. Like, if I don't know who you are, you can tell me all day long, we go to all these events and you're like, there are all these Black contractors, there are all these people, because it's not just about contractors, it's individuals in the community who might be able to work for a subcontractor or be a worker for a general contractor. Maybe you're not certified on special equipment and you want to figure out, how do I get to that next level? So it's about that as well. But my point is, the outreach is so important, because you'll hear me talk about building that database. And we started doing some of that at the roundtable discussion, and we have some data from people already. But we want to keep that outreach going, because it has to be continuous. And like I said, this project is going to be over many years. So the first step is getting the database. Who are you? Do you have a business today, right? Or are you an individual who currently, like you said, is a plumber or an electrician? Maybe you are, and my mother's Jamaican, so she uses a lot of the, she likes unlicensed.
Handyman.
I want to say handyman. And she doesn't care that they're not licensed, because the little guy does the flooring and she trusts him. My husband is a whole lot of stories like, no, I have to be licensed, insured, So people are all different things. But if you're the person who are the handyman in the community, some people are happy with that, believe it or not. Right, they like that. They're very fine just going to grandma's house and fixing the sink. And you have others who are doing it who may want to transition and get a job, right, in a construction job on the project or elsewhere. So I say all that because I don't know who people are. I want to gather the data. I want to find out who you are. If you have a company already, if you're an individual who has a trade and you're already certified, or you're interested in a trade and you want to get certified. So a lot of this is going to take a lot of effort. I'm the face of this and I'm saying I'm going to do it. One thing people will come to learn about me is when I go out there, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you if I don't agree with you and why I don't agree with you. But the worst thing you could tell me is I'm not going to do something, because if there's a path to do it, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And that's one thing anybody you ask that works for the city of Pompano Beach, who have ever come in contact with me in my life, I am going to execute where I can and where I'm capable. And if there's an obstacle, I'm going to try to go around it. And I'm always going to find a path. And will we be able to do everything? No, because there's always going to be obstacles. You have to be realistic. Not everybody's going to have to get a small business in the downtown. You can only have so many opportunities, right? But you create the incubator and you create a program subject to CRE board approval or city commission approval, where the CRE leases retail space in the downtown, right, at market rate. And they break it up into smaller spaces, and now they can sublease those smaller spaces at, subsidized rents, and you make it more affordable, and then provide some incentives for tenant build out, right? Now, eventually you're gonna have to, find your own financing, but the incubator, we can bring people to the table who do that type of thing, small business financing, but you have to put the work in.
Yeah.
And bringing resources to the table. We talk a lot about financial literacy, right? Because
Absolutely.
starting a business, a big part about that, you have to know what's coming in and what's going out, or you're going to be in some trouble, right?
But
So
there's economic development. There's the small business
Right.
administration. There are a lot
Urban
of
League,
right,
a
yeah,
lot of
and I don't know
those.
everything,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
All I'm saying is that, listen, I'm inspired to do it. I want to bring the right players to the table,
Right.
to do it. I know that there's nonprofits in the Northwest that want to be a part of this.
Yes.
And we can have that conversation, absolutely. But sometimes people also have to understand that when you're going for this grant money, sometimes you have to hook up with the big players to get
You
the
have
money.
to
and then
be the
maybe you can
physical
pass it
partner,
through.
and
Yeah,
then it goes
because,
through.
like I said, these grants are competitive, especially if you're going for the more notable ones and you're competitive and and
That's why collaboration.
you
is
have to
important.
collaborate.
Oh, yeah.
But you
That's
also have
key.
to understand how the system works,
Yeah,
right?
it's
That's
key.
important too. How does the system work, and how can we be successful in an application to the state, right, or to the federal government, and what do they look for?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been doing this long enough where I know what they look for, and even still, when you do everything you can,
Yeah.
you just don't get the money
Yeah.
because they're looking for something, or somebody else knew somebody. Sometimes
Yes.
it's who you know, it's not what you know.
Right.
So, I mean, just continuing to navigate that process and to collaborate and just work together. And like I said, I'm committed to doing that.
It's important that you touch on the collaboration that it's going to take, because like you say, it's not everybody's going to be able to open a business in the downtown project, but there's such a need for us and this is me speaking to me and speaking to like-minded people from the Northwest District. I say this, like, the issues that the Northwest District has, you can literally pick those issues up and mirror them to any Black community that is going through redevelopment of some sort like this. Like, these issues are not unique. They are the issues across the nation when it comes to our communities and how development is happening in our community. So I've made it, my mission for the rest of my life to build better communities. And I want my communities to look like me. And when I say I want them to look like me, I want communities that are healthy, because I'm trying to go back to the gym. I ain't been to the gym, but I need to have the access to the gym where I live so that I can get healthy. I need better food options. I am priming my children to be responsible stewards of generational wealth, because I intend to pass that down. That is a mindset that I have now. And that mindset for our community has to be centered around collaboration and collectiveness, because everything that I'm doing now, I'm doing it with a team. I'm not doing nothing by myself now. Like in it requires us to see how valuable we are and how much we need each other in this community, because we don't have to go too far to see that we need each other. We can just look around and see that.
Oh, we learn from each other too, because as much as I've gone to school and I've learned, it's like the more you know, the more you don't know. You know, it's an expression I like to. I ask my kids that, they look at me like I'm crazy. I say, you know what that means?
Yeah.
But I continue to learn and grow as an individual, and I don't pretend to know your story. And you know, like I said, I've gotten to know you over the last couple of months. I've gotten to know Aisha. We've talked about our families and personal things in our lives, and you know, a lot of times we're so busy that we forget to say, "How are you doing today?" And I said that to you a couple of times. I have to stop myself because I'm so busy, and my brain is always in. Especially with this project, there's always a million things to be done that you call somebody and you forget to stop and say, how's Sarah doing today?
Yeah.
You know, and I have to find myself catching myself to do that more with people, because I tend to just jump into the business at hand.
Yeah.
And trying to get the work done.
Well, I can say this, that throughout this process for me, I'm the one from Lotus Mindset that you guys deal with mostly, and Aisha as well. But it's a tough position to be the liaison for this project, because there are feelings and then there are facts. And in this community, getting people to hear each other requires people to listen. And hearing and listening aren't the same thing, right? And we're missing a lot of the information because we're not listening to each other when we speak. And then also too, like you are at the meetings all the time, so you can see how the meetings range when the issue gets to your front door. But the things have always been happening. Some of these things, this downtown project has always been happening. May 14th was a meeting that we've been promoting and letting people know these dates. Y'all come to these meetings. These are the meetings for the downtown. And the mailers, the social media, the people out, street team talking, passing out flyers. We had dinner table conversations. We within the budget, because I asked for more and you cut it down. I say we need this. Suzette say no, you don't. Do it. I'm like,
and I think it's important for people to know too that communication, the tools for communication, are very different. Some of the tools that people are used to using are what they are used to using so dinner, like I remember someone saying, well, where did the food come from? The food is necessary when people have to go right from work and go to a meeting.
Yeah.
Right? Because they can't go home to eat. So you need nourishment, because then you don't have people who are hangry. They can actually hear.
And you don't have,
right? You can hear what someone is outputting, so that you can, let me hear this information. Because now I'm not thinking about, I didn't eat. Right? I'm not thinking about how hungry
my stomach's great. Yeah.
And it seems so simple, but it's so important and nuanced.
Yeah.
And going back, something that I thought about while we were all communicating is prevention is better than the cure.
Absolutely.
Right? We say that in public health. And what is happening now is more like prevention. People scream about the dollars, but as a auditor, it costs so much more to clean things up as a county or as a city. So when you invest in prevention, when you invest in saying, you know what, we need to do things a little differently because historically we have not gotten it right, then that means you are saving in the long run because you're not going to pay for the cleanup, right? You're not going to need a root canal if you were taking care of it the whole time, right? You don't need to put on the molar or whatever, right? You don't need Drano. Right, where it's not clogged, because we started from a different foundation. That's what's new about what is happening now. And the pushback comes, there's a little bit of fear mixed in
Absolutely,
it.
yeah.
There's a little bit of ego because a lot of people have not learned how to effectively communicate,
Yes.
which is what Sarika was just talking about. We've all been talking about that. And go ahead.
Yeah.
What?
Well, one thing I wanted to add, I think the nice thing, and I get that there's disagreements. People are on both sides of the aisle. People feel strongly and passionately about different things going with the downtown. But the nice thing to see is the packed room. The nice thing to see are the people showing up. And I say that because all of the outreach and all of the dollars that we spent, right? Whether it's $50,000 on a mailer or it's social media, it means that we're reaching people, because when people show up and they come after work and we have the snacks to entice them, and I think that is absolutely necessary, it shows me that people are engaging
Right.
and they're showing up,
Because they feel
when we
seen.
don't do it, we get criticized
For
in the
not
other
doing it.
direction, because
Yeah.
like, how, did you go out to the community? Did you communicate? Why is this item before the commission and you haven't done the outreach? And it was necessary because, you know, when we presented that master development agreement to the CRA board and the commission last June, a lot of time had passed. And we were busy in the background working. We were trying to acquire properties, as you know, which was the first, that thing that we were tasked with doing, to try to come to a certain point with that master plan, to say, okay, we're at this point. We want to start and jumpstart the project. But it was necessary to re-engage the community, because we had gone away, and it's not that work was being done. A lot of work gets done a lot of times in the background, right? And when we
Right.
bring things to the commission, it's not always evident to the residents that this work had been done, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of work, trust me,
Yes.
I'm a part of the work. So, I mean, I was glad to see, even though there's disaccord and there's disagreement, that people are showing up and they're engaging, right? And they're talking. But I do agree with you, you know, it's just as important to listen, to be part of the conversation, and to absorb and to make sure you're hearing as much as to speak.
Yeah.
And,
Well, the feelings, feelings, everybody's feelings are valid. And with that, I understand, because I've been in my feelings, here. So with that, I have to make sure I'm channeling my feelings the right way, especially when I'm in a space of business. My business partner always used to tell me, when he was mentoring me, I before the E. It's like I before the E, Sarika, because I'm a very passionate person. And I was like, well, why you always say that? And he's like, he used to say, intelligence before emotions. And I used to push back on that, like, you gonna feel me. I want you gonna feel me, And there's nothing I can do to make someone feel me, People who care about me, people who love me, they care about my feelings, But when I'm doing business, and when the business of the city is 1 + 1 got to equal 2, and I need 2 to make me more, then that requires a level of intelligence when I'm talking to people. It requires me to really get to the facts of things. Like, how does this make sense? And not just common sense, but sense that make dollars. How does this help increase household incomes? How does this make this community better? How does this bring up the quality of life? Like, these are the way my mind processes. And I'm right brain, so I'm very creative. So my mind, I'm always thinking of creative ways to address problems. And when I bring them to you go straight into number mode. You go straight into number mode, and I'm like, yeah,
Stop
Suzette, I hear all that.
Stop
but big
overthinking
picture
it,
here,
Suzette.
big,
Stop overthinking
big picture
it.
here, and it requires a project like this coming into our community. Think about the Northwest District and the history. And I don't know how much you guys know, but Pompano, it's in our bones. It's in everything about us. It's how we dress. It's how we talk, how we communicate. It's everything to us, even in the hard times, even when we are struggling, even in the hood of it, we accept that. Okay, because if this is where we're at, we're going to be proud of where we at. Whatever conditions we in, we proud of this, So here now is an opportunity for the quality of life to improve for a community. And the biggest fear, and I will tell you, the biggest fear is, even for me, is that a lot of people aren't prepared. But it's been coming. And there hasn't been a plan put in place to prepare the people for what has been coming for 33 years. You know how slow a train got to be running to take 33 years to get here? You had all the time in the world to get ready, to be prepared for this.
And the train is still coming. So people,
It
would
is.
be wise to kind of sit with the fact that the train is coming and then be prepared to get on it
Yeah.
and not ran over.
Yeah,
Or
and then not be
left.
shamed.
Right.
Someone said this at the meeting. Someone, everybody's here who's talking about this project. They're here because they're going to be making money off this project. And that was said, and I want people to understand how you
Oh,
have to
my
be
goodness.
very careful about what you let people implant in your brain. It is so important because when that was said, it made me think that you automatically put us outside of the project. You automatically exclude us out of the
And
project.
then why
And-
shouldn't people make money?
For your lack of ambition, your lack of ambition in a project that's now in your community, and you have all these skills, you have all this creativity, you have all these things to share with the world. Now the world is looking at Pompano. It's time for me to put on a show. It's time for me to perform because I've been waiting for an opportunity. So many people have to leave Pompano to go do the things they're great at doing in Pompano. But they don't have the platforms. They don't have the opportunities. And when I'm always talking to the city, and I'm always trying to figure out how to make things better for the next creative and artist to be able to use Pompano on their resume to be a catalyst to what they're doing. And we can't do that when we are we're making people villains for wanting to do better, for wanting to be better. We're villainizing them for seeing the opportunity and saying, hey, I want this, I can do this. And yes, failure is, baby, if I count how many times, but it's part of it. And this project right now at this time and what's going on throughout the world, not just Pompano, throughout the world, this can be a project of hope, which frees people. But if you push fear, it keeps them in chains. It keeps them down. And people have to be aware when you're being rage baited to take something and be angry and go, what do you do with that anger? Because I was angry when I first heard about this project because why ain't nobody told me?
Yeah.
But then I had to do something about it, right? And I got educated. I got involved. And I'm not always having pleasant conversations with city staff.
She's not.
At all. Like we have some real conversations because it's not about telling people what they want to hear. It's what you need to hear so you can prepare for yourself, for your family to be a part of this growth in this city. I didn't make no vote on that dais in 10 years. I haven't said, I haven't been able to vote on that dais. In 10 years, I haven't had one vote. But I have had to ride this wave every turn, every loop, and ride it. The master plan is there of what is coming and what has now been inherited decisions and indecisions. I can't do nothing about that back there, but I can do something about moving forward. And we have to encourage people when they're coming up. And I was proud of people standing up, talking about their businesses, getting themselves out there, because this is the room to do it in front of. You just said you don't know who the people are. So get out there and speak up
And I like
say
seeing
that.
the hues, right? The different hues of people. Yeah, there are some good questions there that we need to pose. But the different hues, because what I saw was that there were people that did not live in the district that understood that it was time for the people that lived in the district to benefit. because that also means that if District 4 looks good, then 1, 2, 3, and 5 are gonna do great, and then Pompano is gonna be better for it
Absolutely.
together.
Absolutely.
But that is community is a mindset.
It's not an
right?
address.
It's not, right,
No.
it's not an address. It's not 1 against 4 and 2 against 4 and 3. It's all, everyone has to get up there and say, you know what? We pass by this all the time,
And have never been over there.
right? We've never
They
been
go
over
down
there.
Atlantic to
Yeah.
95 Turnpike, but
And
don't
then you
even
want
look to
to,
the
and
right.
then I saw in some of the comments, they're like, well, we don't need to be spending that money there. We need more police. No, that is a cure. That is a Band-Aid. This is what's in the community. Why is the community like that, right? What's in the well? Why is the water? It's actually a book.
Because to your point, when you don't have the opportunity, it leads to
Right,
crime.
it leads to
and it perpetuates the
creative
need
ways.
for the police.
Yes.
It leads
right?
to creative ways
Yes.
that are not very healthy
Absolutely.
to make sure that you have what you need to survive.
Mm-hmm.
We collectively, whether 1, 2, 3, 4, Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, everyone should want everyone to fare well.
Mm-hmm.
Because if everyone is doing well, then guess what? Like we all relax,
Yeah.
right? We're not angry
Yeah.
right? We're not angry. We're not spending money on, putting up jails and doing all of this. And then everything is, we're building this up, keep them out. Then it's anger. That's not joy.
Yeah.
People want joy.
Yeah, and I hear a lot about repaving roads, and repaving roads are great, but that can't be a reason not to invest in the Northwest community and
Yeah.
the downtown. And I'm working on that because I'm actually working with the county on the surtax program. That's another subcommittee I'm on, and we've been negotiating with Broward County because right now, remember a couple of years ago, the additional penny, we went from a 6% sales tax
To a 7,
to
yeah.
7%.
Yeah.
And that extra pennies for transportation related expenses. And we're working with the county to free up and allow more of that money to be used for repair and maintenance roads, right?
Yeah.
Because in the past, there was a higher focus on bigger type construction projects. So we're working on that, and we're also working on having the cities know what they're going to be getting each year, because it was kind of a guessing game. It allows us to plan better as a city and program those dollars to things that are important to the community. So I'm certainly not discounting that there are different things and interests that different residents have in the city, and repaving is one of the things I keep hearing.
Yeah,
Right? We don't
yeah,
want to do
no,
this
it
over
is a
here because we need to
concern.
repave. It definitely is a concern.
It is a
probably in the
concern.
Northwest as well in
Yeah.
terms of roads that need to be repaved. So I just say that because I'm just saying that's another thing I'm working on, and hopefully we can negotiate that with Broward County and bring an agreement to our commission to accept those terms to free up those dollars for that purpose.
Okay, so listen, I do want to touch on one more thing, but I do want us to play a video here because May 14th, there was supposed to be a vote. May 14th, there was supposed to be a vote, and that vote didn't happen. It's important for us to make sure that we are, again, sharing with the community information. People who were at the meeting, who stayed to the end, saw what happened. But then it's also on live stream. Our meetings are seen by everybody. Anybody can get on YouTube and go and watch our meetings and see what happened. So we have a clip here we're going to play, and then we're going to talk about what that meeting was supposed to be about. What were you hoping to come out of that meeting, and then now what is the follow-up to what happened from there. So we're going to cue that video up.
Jeez. So, Commissioner Perkins, so I know, right, and as Commissioner Fetzik has said in the past, sometimes perception is seen as truth, right? If the community feels there's no trust, we haven't delivered, that's the sentiment in the community. I can't fix that sentiment in the past.
No, because you've never tried to help the community to fix it
May
anyway.
I finish, please?
You've
Commissioner,
never tried to help my community.
Commissioner.
That's all I'm asking. So, and you said to me before, I don't communicate enough with you. That's why you don't know what I've done for the Northwest. So that's fine. I'll
course,
agree to
yes.
communicate. I'll agree to communicate more with you going forward. Absolutely. I'm open to doing that. Absolutely. But what I can say is I've been open to meeting on this list for months. You've been meeting with the developer. Yesterday, you met with the developer again. And at the last out, I'd like to finish, please.
Yes. Well,
know you're
let me
gonna-
just say to you.
No, you're-
Let me
you'll-
let me stop you because you're getting an attitude and I don't like it.
I'm getting it.
So let me just say this to you, Miss Suzette. Let me say this to you.
Commissioner Perkins,
want to
Commissioner
be allowed-
Perkins.
No.
Okay, we're taking a 10-minute recess. That's it. The special meeting of City Commission. This meeting is now going to be adjourned and be renoticed. How's that?
Okay. So that meeting happened on May 14th. That meeting had been promoted to the community as the meeting that we were going to see how the commission does what in reference to the downtown project.
So there were some key votes that we were asking the commission to consider. You know, we'd gone out into the community, we had engaged with the community. There were two bonds, I'll call them bonds, just to simplify things. That's kind of how the community sees it. One of them we were looking at is funding for a new city hall and the parking garage, as an example. And the order of the items got changed, and that caused some confusion because initially we were going to start with the CRE meeting, which also had a bond to approve, and we decided that it was more appropriate to start with the city hall financing. And the reason we did that is because when the city commission and the CRE board approved that development agreement last June, we committed as a city to construct a new city hall. And in that agreement, it approved two possible ways of paying for the city hall, borrowing the money. One of them is Roca could borrow the money directly, and then they would become our landlord, and we make payments to them every year over 30 years. And at the end of the 30 years, we get title to the city hall. It's like a landlord-tenant relationship. And the other option was for the city to borrow the money directly ourselves. So don't go through the developer, borrow it directly. I saw no risk in doing that as a city. What I was focused on is we left the door open last June to be able to consider us directly borrowing the money because I knew, you know, subject to market conditions, you know, time had evolved. But looking at the finances for that model, it was clear to me that if we can save our taxpayers and our residents $100 million by me picking option B and saying, city, let's borrow the money ourselves, that's the route I wanted to go. One, because it saves money. And to me, it's an obvious choice. But secondly, because another thing that we've been contemplating is a list of items that are important to the community, to the Northwest community as well, all things that will benefit all our residents. And some of them had significant impacts on the finances for the project, right? Impacts to the level of about $60+ million on the finance plan that we had put together for the project. So we wanted to start out with that item because we're like, well, if we're going to agree to all these things over here that impact the finances for the project to that level, $60 million, I want to start out by getting the commission to see this recommendation of saving $100 million, to shake that $100 million loose to allow us to incorporate all of these other things that we wanted to implement. And some of them were small. You know, we talked about the incubator program, we talked about the job placement consultant, but some were big. Vocation Tech, College Resource Center, not building a new Larkin Center, which we understand that's the sentiment of many members of the community not wanting to do that. You have people on both sides of the issue, obviously, but not building a new Larkin Center somewhere in the downtown, still on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard meant that it stayed in place. We had envisioned, you know, bringing revenues from developing that site. So that had a significant impact on the model, right? We understood where the community was coming from, but the reality was it did impact the model, right? So the whole idea of presenting that item first was we wanted to say to the commission and the public, help us to save $100 million, right? So that we can now take those savings and have that much more of a surplus for this project to be able to fund all of these initiatives over here on that list, right? And that list was a separate agenda item. We called it a master project resolution. And it had all of those things, the Vocation Tech, the College Resource Center. We talked about funding incentives for developers to give them, to incentivize them to use local businesses on their team. So I say all that, that was an integral item. Obviously, we didn't get beyond that. It got recessed and it went back to the CRA meeting. The other item on the agenda that was key was a bond for the drainage system. So that waterway system that everyone sees in the project, that was also on there because the CRA has to borrow the money to fund building that infrastructure. And that's important to the project for so many reasons, because it adds value to the project, because the CRA owns all this land over there. But the land in of itself as it exists today, it has some value. But the idea was to implement, to get all the issues resolved with that property, right? And then have ROCA, they're gonna get rid of all the issues, all the zoning issues, all the environmental issues that's wrong with the pads. They're gonna put that linear drainage system in. That increases the value as well, because when all these individual developers come to the table to develop all of these individual pads, they don't have to put in their own drainage infrastructure, right? Because if I came to the table as a developer and you told me, oh, you gotta put your own drainage in, I'm gonna pay less for the land to the CRE. So we're gonna get that money back because it's gonna appreciate the value of the land over time, the more we kind of make all these fixes to all the acreage that the CRE owns. So, you know, again, those were really the three key items. It was the funding for City Hall and trying to save our residents $100 million. It was the bonding for the infrastructure, linear waterway and drainage system. And then it was the list of items that we knew were important to the community that we also had an agenda item on.
I would like some clarification because at the meeting, there were many people that got up there and said that they were for a new EPAT Larkins because at workshops they had seen renderings, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the mayor said that it is not, there's not a new EPAT Larkins.
Yeah, the mayor said that there's not a new EPAT Larkin Center, and that's the sentiment coming from the communities in the district commissioner. But people did stand up and say that. So it's important to say that, you know, people did speak to wanting it, but the negotiations come through the district commissioner. And what the district commissioner has received from the constituents she's talking to is that there is a real desire to keep Pat Larkins where it is for whatever reason, be it sentimental, whatever. But that is the message she's hearing and that she conveyed to the city, and the city has complied with what the district commissioner and those constituents asked for. Now, people came up, people did, quite a few
Because
people.
they weren't aware that it's not even part of the plan anymore.
So that's where they found out. You know,
Okay.
at the meeting, that's where they found out that, okay, you don't want this. We've heard this community. We hear you. This is what we're getting. So we have to take this off the table. And now my thing is this, like with it being off the table now, but then the city now hearing from the community that there is a desire, how do you all balance that? Because your commission is saying, do this. But then you also hear people saying, well, do this too. You know, and that's a hard place to be in because your commissioners, our commission are the messengers for the community. So then they are your bosses. So you have to do what they
Well,
say.
they're the policymakers for the
Policy makers. Let's say policy. Let's say
We
they're
make
making
recommendations. Ultimately, the commissioners have to set policy and vote on key issues in the city. Yes.
So that had to be hard to hear because here you are ready to push this contract through. And there has been a list that has gone out about what is supposed to happen. You've had a couple lists come through, and the list is public records, so anybody can get them. We did a public records request to get the list. We have the list of what the original list is. Stefan, I think you have it, the original list. We want to make sure the community knows this is public records. You can request it through Curvin. Make Curvin y'all best friend and go through the public records request and you can get this. But we're just going to make sure people know that this list is what is the city is working from, correct? So you're working from this coming from the community. Okay, so we're coming from the community, you have to figure out how to finance.
Yeah, one finance it and one bookend it in terms of, rules and regs and what we can do as a city in terms of what we're allowed to do with the money when it comes in. And how we've been talking about this downtown project, it's being self-sustaining, right? Meaning that the revenues it generates are going to pay for any obligations we have in that master development agreement, but also the monies that are left over, trying to utilize that to create a lot of these programs that we talked about earlier. And the list, what came out of the list was a lot of great recommendations. I mean, some of them, had a really big hit on the city, or we didn't agree to it from a policy approach. But a number of things on the list we did agree to, and we did feel like they were great programs and recommendations for us to try to work together to implement.
Okay, so I want to make sure that something came up. So we have up here, this is the list, the original list that came out, the new downtown Pompano Beach list, and these were some things that was asked, and you worked from this list.
Right.
Okay, so when you're working from this list, EPAT Larkins, let's move from that, okay? Because that's not on the table anymore. We're going to keep and we're going to renovate in place, okay? A satellite branch campus, this is where a local campus for historically Black colleges and universities, this is what was asked for in degree programs.
And that evolved into like a college resource center.
A college resource center, okay? So is that with the vocational culinary hospitality? So all that's together?
Right, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
that's
the education component
right.
in a
Kind of
building.
linking those together.
Linking
in one
those
building.
together, okay. And then we have the Sports Hall of Fame Museum. Sports is very important in the Northwest
Right.
District. We produce the best over there, we really do. Okay, so that Hall of Fame Museum.
So we didn't agree to like a standalone museum building.
Okay.
Because again, that was another tax exempt use that was going to impact the finances for the downtown. And for something like that, you have to subsidize it and operate it. So what we did agree to was like a feature. Like it could be an art feature somewhere in the downtown, where it really highlights and recognizes all the important sports figures that's come out of Pompano Beach. So we did agree to do that.
Shout out to Lamar Jackson, MVP. We like to talk about them. And then it says a pioneer monument. So the pioneer monument is to construct and celebrate residents in the Northwest District who's done extraordinary things. Very important to us. Very, very important. So
We have agreed to do that.
you've
Place
agreed
it
to
on the
do
project.
that. You've
You'll be up there.
Well, I don't know. Okay, so what else we got here? A historical business walkway. Let's scroll up. Let's see what we. So that historical business walkway, a landmark which consists of former businesses that originated on Rock Road and Hammondville Road. So Hammondville, bit of history lesson right here. So Rock Road, Hammondville was what it was named before it got changed to MLK Boulevard.
I've heard.
Okay, so Beverly, Commissioner Perkins and Ed Phillips, that was their fight to get MLK, and they won that. They got that. Okay, so kudos to them. We got us a MLK Boulevard. Let's see. Commercial, residential, developer, and contractors. Okay, developers and contractors provide a new downtown development workshop for interested developers and contractors that allows participants to qualify for bidding. 30% of commercial developers and contractors must be Broward County CBE, SVE certified. We're going to talk about that, but let's keep moving. In addition, prime developer contractors must hold a joint venture partnership with an active CBE, SVE certified construction firm. Interested parties must have a City of Pompano Beach business tax receipt, local preference points will be granted to firms securing financial partnerships established with small businesses within the Pompano Beach Northwest CRA per Northwest CRA amendment. So the 30% developer, where are we with that?
So what we did agree to do is that, we talked a lot about the outreach and building the database and so forth. So we didn't agree to a set aside for minorities or Northwest. We did agree.
Why?
So there's been a lot going on from the federal level down to the state about diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. You'll see a lot of cities that have had programs, or school districts or counties or universities, right? They're either stripping those programs or they're renaming it or repurposing it. And there's certain words now you can't use in contracts, right? And, as a city, we get grant funding, but we also get money from the state, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times that kind of controls how we kind of carry things out, because we don't want to lose those revenue sources. So when things are trickling down and rules are coming, we have to be mindful of that. So when this came up, we had a lot of conversations with the legal department, because, God bless the lawyers, but we always have to go through the lawyers just to make sure what we're doing is on the up and up. So, they said you can't do the minority set-asides. That's a no-no. I don't care if you even sell the pads to the end users. That's not something they would recommend doing and running afoul of anything. So I was like, okay, so how can we do this? And there was a motion made last year for a percentage
of minority participation incentives.
And so what we did agree to is to try to encourage that 30% participation of, you could be a CBE or SBE, of course, but we didn't want to limit it to that, because when you're a CBE, SBE, you can't make more than a certain amount of gross revenues, per year or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we didn't want to limit it to that, because there's certainly different varying sizes of businesses that are in Pompano that the Northwest has worked with, they like as well, mm-hmm. and they do great work for the city, don't get me wrong. So, what we said is, how do we incentivize general contractors that come on board to want to work with local contractors? First, we have to identify who they are, because we kind of buck up against the same problem, right? Is who are the local contractors that want to work? What you could be a GC, you could be a local sub in a trade, electrical, plumbing, you do roofing, landscaping, whatever it is building that database, because I think what we're finding is some people aren't registered with the city, right, to be a vendor. And that's always been a struggle over the years, because that's the first door to even get your foot in the door to do business with the City of Pompano Beach. So identifying and gathering that data and building that database and pre-qualifying people, so that when these opportunities start to come about in the downtown over the next 10 years, let's say, is that we make it easy for people. You come in as a general contractor, we're gonna say, oh, look here are all these, 50 businesses, and they're in these different types of trades, and these are the services they provide, or the goods. We're making it easy for you, but not only are we doing that, we're incentivizing you to use them, because, a lot of times, developers or general contractors, they like to use who they want to use, right? Either they do good work for them, it's easy, they get good pricing for them, and they've used them for years, so they know they're going to get the best price. I think the incentive is important, because what the incentive does is, let's say they get 3 quotes to do electrical work, and let's say the local person is a little higher in price, right? What the city has agreed to do is, we're going to compensate them for picking that local trade to work on their project. Right. And we have a formula, it's 1% of the construction value of their project, right? Okay. So it starts with our projects, because we got to build a new city hall and a garage. So we offered that same incentive to Roca Point Partners as our master developer, because they're overseeing designing and construction of those city buildings for us. So they're not going to keep that 1%. It's going to trickle down to the general contractor. All they're doing is going out and finding a general contractor to build our projects, right? But the same thing will happen, because it could be a local general contractor. They could use a local engineering firm, a local electrical guy, a local site work guy, right? But again, incentivizing them to pick local when they have choice to go elsewhere with that payment. Okay. So we put that on the table to try to incentivize, and at the same token is doing that outreach, right? We know we can't say minority, And we know we can't say, you know, I even said, can we do Northwest? And legal's like, no, you shouldn't do that because then other people in the city, you know, we have 6 commissioners. We certainly want to make sure that everybody has those opportunities, but you can still have the outreach, right? Where you're going to the different centers, the Larkin Center, you know, and you're having these job fairs and you're having these workshops and you're bringing people to the table to help people get certified or insurance or bonded, and bringing those partners to the table to walk people through that process. So again, we're very committed to doing that for that downtown. I hear the community. I know what the community is looking to do. You're going to have to meet us halfway to get there and show up when we have these events, obviously, and sign up and get registered. Because if you're not registered and we don't know who you are and you don't speak up, when those opportunities come by, there's nothing we can do to help you, right? So
Right.
it really has to be a collaboration.
Okay, so I want to kind of finish out this list, but I do want to get to what was on the 14th because we're going to be wrapping up here. Employment Northwest, 2 full-time consultants assisting with job placement. You guys,
So we agreed to do a job placement consultant with staff. So, you know, we used to have Dahlia Baker back in the day and she had staff. And one of the things I worked with her on the project was on the beach.
okay,
And every time they were hiring, I said, I want you guys to connect. Dahlia, I want you to know that hiring manager for the hotel, Oceanic Beach House. And we ended up employing 30% of residents. So we can duplicate that effort, and I think we can be very successful in having, you know, that resource on staff.
okay. Community benefit funding. So there was a number that came out initially at the presentation that Rocal Point did, which was $500,000. And that was what is supposed to be utilized for Northwest nonprofit organizations and homeless concerns. And it
Schools.
and schools. So there's Blanche Ely High School, Charles Drew Resource Center, Crystal Lake, Markham Elementary, Palm View. There's another sheet here. And this money, for this $500,000 that was proposed in the beginning. So who pays this $500,000?
The master developer. So the city had nothing to do with that discussion. We're not a part of that process. It doesn't come through the city. So it's something that the developer has agreed to do for the community.
Okay.
In terms of those.
This was the first presentation, $500,000 that was going to be given on behalf of the master developer, which is Rocal Point.
Yeah, he had agreed to put it, they had agreed to put it in like an escrow account.
An escrow.
And they were trying to tie it to when they were going to get their payments from the project. So they were trying to tie it to when they got paid. They would be willing to share that with the community in that way.
Okay, so there I can remember, and I don't like putting words in people's mouth, and that's why I cue the videos because I don't want this to be Serica said. No,
Right,
Serica's not saying, and I don't have that video, but $500,000 in the sentiment of the community is that's nothing, nothing. Like, what are we gonna do with $500? That's the community feel of it. So there's another. The revamp list that was on May 14th. That was what was going to be voted on, all right? And there's a refined list based on months of negotiations with you.
Primarily meeting with the developer, but a lot of things on the list, really the city. It had to come back to the city for consideration because we had to decide how it affected the plan and how we would fund it and in what framework we would do that.
Okay.
So those are
You
the
know,
meetings that
then
will
the lawyers
take
have to
place.
get involved. How do we word this? How do we say this? You know, I'll have the idea and I say, this is where I believe the community wants to go with this. How can we put it in a way so that it fits in the box? And, you know, we're doing all of that in the right way. So.
Okay. So this is the rest of it. Sanders Park Elementary Daycare Centers, District 4 and 5. Private schools, District 4 and 5. Northwest Pompano nonprofit organizations, homelessness. I don't know if that's, you know, specific to the nonprofits that service homelessness, or is homelessness as a separate.
I'm going to infer that it's probably
Yeah.
nonprofit.
Okay.
I wasn't at the table for that discussion, so.
Okay, so this is the list that went to the developer. of what first. It didn't come to you.
No.
So this list went to the developers first. From who?
Commissioner Perkins and just some community members.
Commissioner
Leave it at
Perkins. Commissioner Perkins and people from the community met with the developer and they came up with this list on behalf of
Things
the
they
community.
thought was important to the community that would uplift
Yes.
the community.
Community people still. They're from the Northwest. They're
Right.
representing the community. And the district commissioner has worked with them and the master developer on that list.
Right.
Okay, so that list was amended, and in that amendment of the list is what was gonna be on May 14th. That was gonna be the vote, correct?
Right, so there was an original list in the agenda backup, but then the day before, there were some amendments, recommendations of tweaks. that
Wait, the
were
day
asked.
before, hold on, clip. Okay, so you say the day before there was some amendments to what?
To the list that was in there, because when you do an agenda, it gets loaded the week before in the system, so the
Right.
public can access it and see all the items that are going to be on the agenda. So the day before, it came to the city's attention that there were some additional things that the committee was asking for, so we had to work and try to make it onto the dais, and we called it a walk-on. So we placed like an amendment to that the list that was in the backup on the dais for the commission's consideration. We didn't really get to it, but
Right. Where did the amendment, where did the amended list come from?
it came from the developer after meeting with the district commissioner. So,
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so,
so we were really trying to work collaboratively to try to review the list, and they asked to bring this amendment for consideration on the 14th to the commission.
Okay. So you have the new list? All right. So the list changed, and because there was conversation on the dais that they had received an amended list from the city, but the list did not come from the city.
Not directly, I mean, obviously we're presenting
Right,
it,
you're
so
right.
that's what they mean, I guess when they say it's coming from the city, because obviously as staff, we're putting it on the dais for the city commission's consideration, but we did not initiate the changes, I think is the right way to say it, right?
That's what I
Right.
want to understand, because that is maybe how I heard it, and maybe other people heard it that way as well. So, okay. So then, Sarika,
yes.
we're on the list. The list is about to be queued up.
Okay. All right, so I'm wanting to make sure we get this out there because we're gonna wrap up here. And this is a lot to talk about. I mean, we're trying to cram everything into, while we have you understand you're a busy woman, but we're gonna need a part 2 and follow up. Because Lotus Mindset is very serious about building this bridge of communication. So it's gonna require follow-up conversations. I want that list to be queued up that was going to be on the 14th. Someone's asked was, who's in charge of the escrow? Who's in charge of the escrow? Let's just start there.
Oh, you see, you're talking about the developer. So,
Yes.
like I said, the city's not really a part of that process. My understanding was there was going to be an escrow account created at some point, and then they would work through, obviously on that initial list, there were a lot of schools listed. So the idea was determining how much goes to each school, as an example, to Blanche Ely or Charles Drew Elementary. But again, the city's not a party to that discussion.
Okay.
It's purely between the master developer and the community.
And the community. Okay, so let's queue this list up that it was for May 14th.
Right.
So on May 14th, there was going to be a vote. The vote was for the money is going to cost, and it was going to be for the
100 million,
commitment
right? The commitment,
Right.
the 100 million.
that it was
saving,
saving
right.
Yeah.
if you go with
Plan
private, I mean public
public,
financing.
public.
If you go with public financing, you save 100 million. If you go with private financing,
You don't save 100.
You don't save 100. Okay, so we
See,
queue
it's
that
simple
up.
enough to me, Sarah.
It's up. I see it, but I don't see them. So I get that. Okay, so on this was going to be a long resolution that was read, and I want to get to right here. It starts to break it down. So hold up, go down some stuff. I want to get right here to where we talk about what is all on this list. So there's the Pat Larkins, section 1 here. it talks about Pat Larkins not being part of the obligation for the master developer to build, and that there is a total of 1.5 million that it's not to exceed
Right.
that amount, right? So it doesn't exceed in renovation. Okay. I'm going to read this. The city will make enhancements to, I can't read, it's cut down. The city will make enhancements to the existing tax exempt building known as the E. Pat Larkins Center as part of the master project, unless it is determined that the new Pat Larkins Community Center to be located in a new location on MLK Boulevard should be included in the master project. If such determination is made by the city commission, it will allow the existing building to be repurposed for taxable redevelopment, with the new E. Pat Larkins Center to be deemed a civic building project in accordance with the First Amendment of the Master Developer Agreement. So this goes into how much you all were going to put towards an amount to rehab, to renovate, okay? So not touching, rehabbing the center. 2, education component. If it is determined the E. Pat Larkins Center can be repurposed for taxable redevelopment, the new E. Pat Larkins Community Center may be expanded to provide space for vocational training and a college resource center, or the city will include such space in a standalone facility with the master project. So there's going to be a standalone.
Yeah, so initially when we had proposed a new center, still on MLK, somewhere in the downtown, not in the existing location, the idea was to add another floor and put the vocation tech and the college resource in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're not building a new center now, what we've agreed to is do a standalone vocation tech and college resource center somewhere in the downtown project.
Okay. Okay. So vocational training, all of that will go into the new standalone.
Right.
So I think I read in here the standalone is anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 square
Right,
feet.
so there was an ask to go to 15,000 square feet. We did not agree to that at this time. We have to do a feasibility study anyway. I've always liked the idea of a vocation tech. It was actually in the initial master plan.
I remember
right.
that. Yeah.
And, I didn't have time to do a lot of research on it to get us to this point, to the May meeting. So what I put in there, being the practical person that I am, is we have to do a feasibility study, right? One of the things that was thrown out was hospitality and culinary. But also I'd heard aviation, I heard medical, and I really feel like we need to do that feasibility study to figure out where the highest demand is. And there seems to be leaning towards hospitality and culinary. So again, that comes with putting in a kitchen. We don't know. We've estimated what we think it's going to cost for 5,000 square feet. We've agreed to do 5,000 to 10,000, but again, it's subject to completing that feasibility study because we want to see what Atlantic Vocation does. Atlantic Ely has a program, some kind of program as well. I've had a chance to really research that in detail, have some information on it. So, like I said, being the practical person that I am, is let's do the feasibility study. Let's talk about it. Let's see where the demand is. We have to present that data back to the commission to make a decision to move forward. But what I've agreed to is to estimate a cost to construct that facility.
That facility.
And it's in the bond financing.
Okay. So Sports Hall of Fame, Pioneer Monument. So this looks like you all were going to put it into, I see your dress, like it's it's just like a green dress right there. So it looks like at this meeting on the 14th, there is a resolution to codify the agreements of the master developer and the community benefits and all of these amendments that were asked for. Scroll up some. Let's go down. Historical business walkway made it. Residential workforce. Let's keep going. Let's see. Commercial and residential developers. Again, this is public records.
We didn't change that.
Okay, so you didn't
Same
change
program
any
I
of that.
talked about before with incentives.
Okay.
to get people to use, local businesses that's still in there.
Okay, so hold on. As it goes, Section 8, resident and tenant relocation and transition. The CRA has an existing relocation policy that applies to residential rental tenants and commercial tenants who require relocation as a result of the CRA's acquisition of property. The relocation policy offers funds for apartment search and moving expenses, security deposit assistance, and relocation assistance. The relocation policy does not apply to owner-occupied property, as the purchase price is intended to reflect the costs associated with relocation. The CRA will continue to apply the relocation policy where applicable to each of the parcels that are acquired. Okay, job placement consultant made it. What else?
About that. Yeah.
We talked about that. Community benefit funding pursuant to the First Amendment to the Master Developer Agreement described in section, stop right there. Section 14, below, the city acknowledges that the developer has voluntarily agreed to a contribution of $1 million to
So they went from $500,000 or 500,000 to $1 million.
So
in
they're
this latest, right? That's what the developer agreed to do.
okay. So the developer is going to give $1 million to be utilized for distribution to schools and nonprofits by an escrow agent of the developer's choosing. The developer acknowledges that the escrow agent shall be solely responsible for distribution of the escrow funds, and that the city shall have no responsibility whatsoever for distribution. Okay, so from 500 to $1 million, that's
Right.
what. And this came about because there was another meeting
Right, the day before.
the day
on the
before.
14th.
Okay, so we have small business, entrepreneurship, the incubator. I
And
like
didn't
that.
change, right?
That didn't change. The civic building financing, incorporation of additional project elements in the MDA.
So what that means is, because we've agreed to the Vocation Tech and the College Resource Center and those developer incentives, it added $9 million to the budget that we have to finance. So
Okay.
that we're just saying to the commission, we need permission to raise the amount we finance to incorporate these elements that are important to the community.
Okay. All right. So City Hall, parking garage, Northwest Neighborhood Authority. In addition to the developer voluntary contribution, section 10 above, the city and developer agreed to fund an additional $4 million to be utilized for eligible city CRA activities within the Northwest District. A Northwest Neighborhood Authority will be established by the City Commission to distribute funds according to lawful activities outlined in the Northwest Neighborhood Authority bylaws. The funding will be made available through the net land sales proceeds derived from the downtown project pursuant to the waterfall structure outlined in Exhibit E of the MDA. The developer and the CRA will contribute a total amount of $4 million once net land sales proceed $50 million. The additional Northwest District funds, with developer to be responsible for 25% of the additional Northwest District funds, for a total. Look at me squinting. For a total of developer contribution of $1 million, and the city CRA to be responsible for 75% of the additional Northwest District funds, in the same proportion as the waterfall split. So, $4 million.
Yes, you want me to break it down? That's what happens when the lawyers get involved.
All right, that was a lot. Like, okay, so how much money y'all putting over there? That's what people want to know.
So pretty much how it works out is the developer has agreed with the community to go from 500,000 to $1 million. That's the bucket you talked about before. They've also agreed to another $1 million. So the ask was $4 million, an additional $4 million on top of the $1 million, where those funds are set aside to be utilized for programs or projects in the Northwest District. So between the city and the developer, we agreed that we would split it. 75% of that the city CRA would cover from our surplus funds from the downtown. So 75% of $4 million is $3 million, and then the developer would cover 25%, so $1 million. The whole land sales formula, basically what that means is, as we start to sell properties in the downtown, the developer does get a piece of that. I want to let me stop here and clarify that, because there's a lot of speculation about giving the developer money and all of this, and the land in the Northwest, you know, the CRA owns 40 plus acres, and it has a certain value as it is today. But as you saw presented by Roca Point Partners on the 14th, the land has a lot of issues wrong with it. Environmental issues, it needs to be platted, fancy terms, but it needs to be zoned. We have to abandon some right-of-way stuff. So there's a lot of issues wrong with the land, and that's one of the main things that Roca is tasked with. Fixing all of these issues, because when they do that, it increases how much that land is worth. So the land is worth this today. Roca is going to come in, they're going to fix all of these issues and increase the value of the land. Not only that, they're tasked with putting in that infrastructure that we talked about earlier, that linear waterway system, which provides drainage for all these developers when they come to the table. That also increases the value of the land. So the land is worth this today. They're going to come fix all the issues. They're going to put the infrastructure in. So they're contributing to increasing the value of the land that the CRA owns today.
Okay.
And because they're contributing to that appreciation in the value of the land, they're going to share in the land sales of that appreciation between the city and between them and the CRA as the primary owner of the land. And the way we did that is when we sell the first 15 million of land sales, the CRA gets 90% of those land sales and the developer gets 10%. Then when you go to the next queue, 15 million to 100 million in land sales, the city gets 25%, developer gets 25%. So we were smart. We want them to work hard, right? We want to we want to incentivize them to improve the land.
And
improve the land, but now you have to go sell it, right? And you're incentivizing them to add value to that land, so they get to share in that value that they're creating. The $50 million thing says that we'll agree to that $4 million additional to the community, but once we hit that $50 million in land sales and the project is stabilized and we're selling those pads, once we go above that, we'll start to tap into that $4 million to designate it for uses in the Northwest community, and that's what we agreed to. And the Northwest Neighborhood Authority, the lawyers did that. They said, you got to create this.
A board.
We haven't worked it all out yet.
You don't know what it is. But we have a Northwest CRA advisory committee.
You do. I mean, you know what? It was just a proposal.
Yeah. But these things can be, you know, you said something in one of the presentations that we did, the videos that we did when I did your interview that, you know, there's a lot we can do. We just got to get going.
Exactly.
So we can do things. So I do want to bring that back up. We've actually gone over our time quite a bit because there's a lot to talk about. We didn't get to the premiere we wanted to do, but we will. And we want to make sure we keep this conversation going. So we're going to figure out how to have more conversations because I'm pretty sure there's, as you can see, there are people asking questions. They want to know. And we want you all to feel like you can come and talk to the community, but also the community can come and talk to you. And let's really get to what it is that we want so that the city can provide and understand where people are coming from. So any last words, Aisha?
Education, truth. We all needed this today.
Yeah.
We had video, we had documents, we had questions, we got answers.
Right.
Very simple.
All right. Suzette Sybil, any last words before we go?
You know, let's just continue to be honest with each other. Like I said, you and I have had conversations, tough conversations where I'm like, oh, sorry, she's rough, she's tough, you know. So, and I'm open to having that as long as it's done in a respectful way, that we're listening as much as we're speaking. My expectation when I'm communicating with someone is that that's done with the utmost respect. And that if you feel a certain way about me or you feel I'm not doing something, come and have a conversation with me, right? So I can have a chance to respond to you, my truth, and where I'm coming from. So I get that there's a lot of mistrust in the community. I hear that all the time. I don't trust you, so I'm not going to do this. That's one of the reasons we're trying to memorialize some of this stuff in writing, because as much as I'm saying my face is out there, I'm going to execute, because that's just how I operate. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do my darndest to get it done and try to get it done. If I can, I'm going to tell you I can't do it and why I can. But we're trying to memorialize that stuff, right, for the commission's consideration. And sometimes we're just proposing a format, you know, of how it should work. Sometimes the lawyers say it has to work this way, and I have to operate in a box, because at the end of the day, we're a city. We have rules and regulations we have to follow, right? So yeah, you've seen the red tape. The red tape is there.
It's there.
You know,
It's there.
So again, thank you for having me this evening. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
And see you next time.
I will say this to the community, that this is our opportunity. And it is not an opportunity for one group of people. This is a multi-generational, intergenerational conversation, project, and opportunity. I want to encourage everyone to do public records requests, ask questions, show up to meetings, be proactive. Because a lot of people are showing up very emotional right now. And while I understand the emotions, we need to be level-headed in how we're moving forward, because we are all in this together. Personal relationships are being challenged right now because we are on opposite sides of this choice. But we are not against each other. We're just on opposite sides of an issue. So let's remember that.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
real quick? So
Oh, and how can they reach you?
Oh, you can email me at Suzette, S-U-Z-E. You can reach me at Suzette, S-U-Z-E-T-T-E .Sibble. That's S-I-B-B-L-E at COPBFL.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. But what I'm going to tell you is that on May 27th, we are bringing one agenda item back for the downtown, and it's to consider the public financing for the City Hall project so that we can save the residents of Pompano Beach $100 million over a 30-year time frame, which allows us to have that much more surplus dollars to invest in the community. That's it.
All right, y'all. This is the Bottom Up Podcast, where we start from the bottom up, but up we must go. We'll see you.